So let's jump into this talk about what really is next level agile and what do we mean by that. A little background on me for those that I haven't had a chance to meet. David Hawks founded Agile Velocity back in 2010, and I do certified Scrum training, certified enterprise coach, which just means I've seen lots of different environments, lots of different things, and lots of companies that are struggling. And a lot of what's in this talk are patterns that we've seen that have emerged, and that next level of where people are trying to get to. So we see a lot of the same kinds of things across organizations. So let's begin. What's on this slide is where I see most organizations fit into kind of how they would describe their current state of agility. Many organizations are just what I would call superficial agility, that they're going through the motions, they're maybe making their work visible, which is better, but there's still lots of carryover. They may not have a strong product owner or scrum master, and they're still working in silos and maybe throwing things over the wall to each other. So they're kind of doing Scrum, but not being very agile. Improving agile is maybe an organization. In a second, I'm going to ask you where you think you fit in this. So think about your team, your organization, where do you fit? Improving agility is you're starting to have retrospectives as meaning. The Scrum Master is trying to coach the teams to be better. Work is estimated, and we have some sense of velocity, but that doesn't mean that it's a consistent or predictable velocity. So we're starting to improve, but we're maybe not to this level of predictability where we don't have very much carryover. We're getting done every sprint. The team's focused. So predictable agility is that we are breaking down work. We're swarming. We have whole team ownership. And then, and that's a great state that if you can get to and have a predictable cadence of delivery. And then we call, fast agility, where we're delivering quickly. We might have DevOps, CI/CD. We're delivering things into production. We might be releasing one feature at a time. Our cycle time is short. You might even be releasing faster than a sprint cadence if you're doing Scrum. And so that's where you kind of get to this level of fast agility. So what I'd like y'all to do is think about which one of these you fit in, and go ahead and text to, if you've joined the poll, text A, B, C, or D if you are in the category of superficial agility, you think, or improving agility, or predictable agility, or fast agility. Not seeing anybody submit yet. Oh, we got one answer in. Okay.
Awesome.
We'll have more meaning if people participate. I wonder if people are having challenges with that.
In the chat, people are saying that they've submitted, and someone is also asking if he can just vote in the chat window. He said A.
Yeah, that's not gonna go into the poll results. So, are we having? We got 3 in. Looks like
there's probably just a delay because we've got at least 5 or 6 people in here that said that they've
voted.
Okay. Submitted via text.
Okay. Okay. Cool. All right. So let's do this, and we'll see some live data coming in. There we go. Now we just had a delay. Now we're up to 19. Now we're cruising along. 20, 21. All right. So interesting where we're kind of ending up so far. So we've got a lot of folks that are trying to improve. That's great. But we've got, what's that? 30%, a third at predictable or kind of fast agility. And I'm actually surprised. Last time I did this poll, we had a lot more of A, superficial agility. There was a lot more folks that are like, hey, we're going through the motions, but we're not really getting better. And so we got a good group today that's less on the superficial agility. That's good.
Can you show the definitions again?
The actually, that was a question. I could, but I'm gonna move on. Just just get a sense of the polling. So superficial, like we're doing the motions, improving, we're getting better. Predictable, we've got a predictable cadence of delivery, and fast is like we're short on our cycle time. So this is interesting where we are today, and I think the current state of benefits that people are really striving for with Agile are things like increased visibility so we can make better informed decisions, continuous improvement at a team level where the teams are taking ownership of their improvement, predictability so that not that we're predictable in saying like we know exactly what we'll deliver 6 months from now, but predictable in that we know we can get about 4 or 5 things done every 2 weeks and get them done and get them potentially shippable and potentially into production. So then we're shortening faster time to market. These are a lot of the things that when companies come to us and say, hey, we want help with Agile, that this is what they're trying to get out of it, is like predictability and faster and maybe higher productivity. And while those are all great, that's kind of what I would say is currently like Agile 1.0, like what we're trying to achieve today. And the stuff that I want to talk to today is like what's past that. So some of you have probably seen something that we put together that's called the Path to Agility. And I'm not going to, we have a whole different talk that goes through the Path to Agility, but the top levels kind of align with what we just were talking about, like learning, so improving agility, predictable agility, accelerate. What we're going to talk about today is really our last stage of the Path to Agility, which is an adaptable organization or organizational agility, and what does that really mean? And so that's what we're going to be digging in is what's kind of the later stages besides just some of the basic building blocks that a lot of people are talking about of how do we get to predictable agility, but we wanted to kind of highlight what's new. And in order to do that, we need to understand where do we come from and what's changed. So first, let's think about that, Agile was kind of born actually in 1995. Scrum was presented for the first time at UPSLA 95 here in Austin, Texas. And as you see in that picture, it looked a lot different than it does today. There was the pre-game, mid-game, post-game. That it didn't even have like sprint planning and sprint retrospective. And it's been a lot different since 1995. I remember writing code in 1995 and shipping CDs and shipping software off to my customer and never being able to ever see how it was used, if it was ever installed, right? Like we didn't have visibility to where the software was running very well back in 1995. Then in 2001, Agile's born. We have the Agile Manifesto that was written with contributors from the Scrum community, XP community, Crystal community, and now we have Agile. So that was 17 years ago that Agile was born, and we're still implementing a lot of the core tenets the same way as they were then, and that helps us get to predictable and fast agility. But I think that's not enough anymore, and that's what that's what we're trying to explore here today. So in 2006, we started to hear, those commercials that were talking about the cloud, and we were like, what the hell is the cloud? And I think that has really changed a lot of the dynamics of what is capable today. So now, if we have our software in the cloud and in a SaaS type environment, what that then allows us to do is to be able to deploy much quicker because we're deploying in an environment our company controls versus shipping CDs or doing major releases with on-premise software. So the cloud has enabled the ability for us to deploy quicker. It also has enabled the ability for us to get analytics and metrics because we have a direct access to that machine, those logs, the information, the analytics of the usage. Where back in '95, right, when I'm shipping CDs, I have no idea what people are clicking on, what the flow is that they're using. Right, I don't have any visibility to that. So the cloud has really you know, and the tech stack and things that we are using today has really changed the dynamics of what is possible for us. The other big thing that was an influence is, you know, everybody's now got a smartphone in their pocket, and the way that I think that has changed our dynamics is it's taught our consumers something. It's taught our consumers, because everybody's got one of these, to be able to absorb software changes at a rapid pace, right? Before 2007, everybody was like, no, we're only going to do 3 major releases a year because we don't want to take a lot of changes. But now we're used to, you know, Facebook is updating all the time. There's always updates that are coming, and we're always getting incremental changes. And our consumers, so therefore our customers or our stakeholders, are now used to the fact that software is just a continuous flow of things and tweaks and changes and improvements and changes. So that's changed the dynamic of the people and their appetite for receiving software quickly and changes quickly. And then, you know, we've got this whole thing called DevOps, which has now created the infrastructure that supports our ability to push software quickly. Things like feature branching with Git, all the way to automated deployment with automated tests, right? And so our ability to not only deploy things quickly, but to monitor if we broke something in production and get alerted even before our customers see it, and then to be able to respond quickly to fix it before even somebody maybe notices, right? Like, so DevOps has provided that infrastructure, which was only possible because of the cloud and SaaS, right? And it's only possible that we can push things that quickly if there's an appetite and ability for our consumer base to do that. So I think these 3 major areas have really changed the dynamic of what is possible and what it allows us to do, and the analytics and visibility that we have. And with that, when you also think about the rate of change that's exponentially increasing, and I think about it more as a rate of disruption, the ability for any company, anybody, anywhere, because they can, to create a product that can disrupt your product, anybody could do that right away. And they can do that because the cost to get a new product built is so much smaller. I remember a startup that I did, you know, the first initiative that I did on my own, that was back in like 2003 timeframe. And back then, you know, in order for me to launch a new app and a new site, I had to go rent a rack at a data center. I had to buy hardware and servers. I had to buy, you know, like $10,000 worth of Oracle licenses and other things just to get going. And today with AWS, I could pay 12 cents and like have a server. And now and if I have no traffic, it didn't cost me very much. So my barrier to entry is much smaller. All of the technology can be accessed from anywhere in the world, and therefore can be deployed anywhere in the world. So now competition and choice is huge. And so now we have to react quicker, or else somebody else is going to disrupt our market and disrupt us right out of business if we're not careful. So the rate of disruptions, we have to start reacting quickly, or else we're going to get left behind. So that's kind of the dynamic that's got us to this like imperative that we need next level agility, and we've got the technology and the infrastructure and the mindset that allows us to do next level agility that we couldn't have. You know, I'm not saying like the manifesto was wrong in 2001, but maybe it's a little bit outdated now in terms of what the capabilities are. So, you know, if I think about like what benefits are we really striving for next level agility, I think about things like, are we validating or invalidating our ideas as fast as possible? How do we know we're building the right thing? We've all heard the stat, like 64% of the features we build are rarely or never used. So we have a problem that we are building a lot of the wrong stuff, and that takes time. And if we could start honing in on building the right thing, then we're going to be able to address the market need much faster. So how can we validate our ideas and assumptions, or more importantly, invalidate those assumptions as fast as possible? How do we get faster, not time to market? How do we get faster time to value, so that the things that we're building are actually proven valuable things? I would assert that no longer is the finish line code is in production. I think now the finish line is that it's in production and we have validated that it has solved the market problem. And that's a very different way of thinking about it. But too much today in Agile 1.0, we're thinking about like, hey, it's just fast agility is still just getting something into production. And now with Next Level Agile, I'm saying that's not good enough. It's in the production and we have proven that it's solving the problem. We validated that in production. I think team agility is great in Agile 1.0, but organizational agility is where it's at. And sorry, and what I mean by, I get choked up talking about that. What I mean by this organizational agility is that it's not just about the technology organization. Organizational agility is about how is marketing working in an agile way that is responsive and incremental and iterative the same way that the technology organization is. What about HR? And how about the organization as a whole? Are they still, we've seen organizations where the teams are very agile, but working within a waterfall plan-driven mindset, which is going to cause a lot of tension and friction, which is we're still executing on a plan that has a lot of bad assumptions in it. And organizational agility is about us starting to change the mindset of the whole that say we need a learning culture more than an execution culture. And then that allows us to be have faster response to change, right? So if we have our ability that we are probing and sensing and putting things into the market and getting value or validation back, we need to be able to respond to those changes and respond to the disruptions much faster, not just respond fast to delivering on a plan. And that's what a lot of Agile 1.0 is doing, is we're just executing on the plan as opposed to responding to those market needs. So what I want to ask y'all is, what would you think, next level agility would look like? If you were to write a manifesto statement, I want you to think about, and I'm going to ask you to text this one in here in a second. So if you would write a next level manifesto statement that kind of embodies, these benefits of saying like, so one way to think about it is on the overside. What's a practice that we're doing today that you think might not be the best practice? And what would be the better practice? What is something I would value this over I would value that? So go ahead and if you can think of one, go ahead and text that in to the poll and just phrase it as this over that, and everybody's going to see this. So be nice to each other and let's keep it PG if you can. So let's see if we start getting some of these in. We've got 2 that have shown up. Let's see, 3.
We did get some feedback that setting up the voting app does take a minute or 2. So
okay. Maybe put that
setting it up, yeah.
Put that on the first page. I think I'm getting a delay on my phone to turn the poll actually on. Oh, there we go. Okay. So let's see. So value, opportunity, and experiment much more over the constant cadence of sprints, right? Yeah. So experiment-driven learning culture over execution. High value over comprehensive features. Quality over time to market. Yeah. So not just speed. Speed could affect quality. So code quality over functional code. Feature delivery over points. Yeah. So are we just measuring? What are we measuring? Are we measuring the right thing? Business value over the company plan. I like that one. Teamwork over silos. I like that too. Working software over documentation. Teams over individual. Yeah. So I had a organization we just started working with. They came up with teaming versus hero mentality. I thought that was pretty good. We value usability testing over releasing just to release. We value over execution. Yeah. Long-term vision over short-term financial results. So we're seeing a lot of things in the theme in here of like learning over just kind of execution. We're seeing a lot of things around like teams versus just kind of individuals. We're seeing, also getting to that value versus just getting stuff done. Predictability over speed. Yeah. So, and we'll put this list together in the blog that comes out after that captures the questions and that kind of stuff. Learning, I like that, learning over perfection, right? Developers fall into that trap a lot. Even product managers, we fall into that trap a lot. Value over velocity. Yeah, I did this talk the other day and somebody said, you guys are going to have to change your name from Agile Velocity to Agile Value because we say value over velocity. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing here. So you guys took a stab at it. Let's see how yours align with for the values that I came up with. So, so one of those that I came up with is continuous delivery over incremental development. So in Agile, we talk a lot about working iteratively and incrementally and getting pieces done. But just getting something done and then in another sprint, another sprint, another sprint, and still taking 12 weeks to push something out. How do we actually start getting, instead of just continuous integration, we're actually getting continuous delivery of value into production? And I also think about the learning part of it. I think of it as discovery over execution. So discovering more about the problem space, discovering more about the solution space. So if we really emphasize the learning element of that over us just executing on a plan or executing on bad requirements or unvalidated requirements. And then also, that validated market feedback over quick stakeholder feedback. So who are we getting feedback from? And sometimes we convince ourselves we're on the right track because stakeholders are saying, hey, everything looks good, but they're not actually people that use the product and are putting, from a customer perspective. So are we getting validated market feedback over quick stakeholder feedback? And then I think about business agility over just team level agility. Too often I go into an organization and the leadership just sees this as, hey, Agile, that's what the teams do, and we just need to help these teams be more agile. Can you go do that, as opposed to thinking about this as an organizational and business problem? So what I'm going to do, with these, so we've got these, and some of these align pretty well with the ones that you guys came up with, and you guys added some more into that. I want you to think about, in your organization, what impedes your organization's ability to achieve these higher levels of agility? What is going on in your organization that's keeping you from having potentially continuous delivery or a discovery kind of mindset, or that you're getting validated market feedback, or getting it from just team level to organizational level? What's the thing or that is doing that? Let's not name names. And let's go ahead and text those in to the Velocity hotline, and let's see what emerges here in this. So we got some legal compliance. That's always an interesting one. But yeah, go ahead and text in. We'll see what kind of emerges here. Politics, yeah. Got some, the customer, leadership just got bigger. Silos, projects, business, culture, change, resistance, legacy. It's just the way we've always done it. Yeah, sometimes companies get comfortable because they are leading in their space. But we all know if we don't change, we're not going to be leading in our space. Sales driven, that one's interesting. Technology stack could be impeding us. Management is showing up in there. A lot of good stuff in here. So, but the big one there is, is leadership bought in? Do they see it as they're part of the problem or part of the solution? Is the business side? So we definitely always want to make sure does the business understand there's some imperative of their involvement here, and at the end we're helping them achieve their goals. So it's not usually a hard sell, but we got to sell it as outcomes with them, not sell it as tactics or things that we're going to implement. So cool. So good stuff there. So here's some of the top impediments, and see if these, I think these will align with you as well, but that I see is we're trying to change the mindset, right? And we're trying to change the mindset from executing on assumptions and to learning faster, right? As opposed to just, you know, us having a mindset of we got a plan, execute on the plan, and we'll be good, to, you know what, there's a lot, this is a complex situation. We don't have perfect information coming in. We need to have more of a mindset of learning and discovery and figuring it out. And so that mindset change has to happen at the top of the organization all the way down. That's not something that can just go from like team level up. The whole organization or leadership is part of that transformation. And that's not just, again, it's not just technology. It's not just like a couple pockets of marketing and HR doing some agile stuff too. This is the whole organization. Leadership has to go through that. You guys called that out as well with leadership and management as two of your big ones. I saw somewhere in there, some folks had the technology stack. So do we have test automation? Do we have developers who are engaged in writing test automation? Do we have DevOps, and are we investing in continuous delivery? And sometimes that requires some re-architecture of our product to be designed for testability and to be designed in a way that we can deploy modularly. So you know, that could be an impediment to our ability to do that. And somebody, I did this talk at Agile Austin, and somebody asked in the audience, like, so how would you apply this next level agility in an on-premise product? And I would go back to on-premise is what we did, you know, with Agile 1.0, and I think on-premise is one of your impediments of achieving next level agility, which is a technical infrastructure problem that you have. There's things that you could do, but you're not going to be at the same level of agility as somebody who is in a SaaS environment. Analytics. So do we have the analytics and the experiment platform to be running lots of like A/B tests and things where we have a sample size? So while Facebook may release, you know, every 12 seconds or something like that, they don't release to everybody at once, right? So when they have a change, they might release it to 5% of the market, and then if everything goes good, then they might expand that to 25%, then 50%, then 100% of their users. So do you have a experiment platform that allows you to put things out and then escalate, or to do A/B testing with just a sample size of folks as opposed to your core audience, right? So like, you know, that becomes now an infrastructure to be able to support that. And I think a lot of companies, that's not on their backlog anywhere to develop that. So these are some of the impediments that I'd add to the ones that you guys came up with. So let's then kind of dig into what are 6 practices that we could do. This is what we're going to wrap up with. What are things that we could actually implement in order to make this next level agility happen? So what is, when rubber meets the road, what are we actually doing? So first thing is this: who are we serving? I've seen a lot of companies that have shortened the feedback. We talk in Agile a lot about shortening the feedback loop. I see a lot of companies that have shortened the feedback loop to stakeholders, right? And we're doing sprint reviews, and who's in your sprint review? In your sprint review are a bunch of your stakeholders, but you don't have any actual customers in your sprint review. You don't have any users in your sprint review. And if you do, you're lucky. You know, I would say probably 90% of the folks on the call today probably don't have actual customers in their sprint review. And so what that means is we're getting feedback, but from a proxy, from a middleman, right? Like somebody in the middle who is trying to represent the customers, but they're making a bunch of assumptions and a bunch of guesses, and they're biased, right, to the features they wanted and how they thought it should be built. So we don't know if we're building the right thing until our customers and our market are actually using it and validating it. So we've got to figure out, how do we shorten the feedback loop all the way to the market and all the way to the customers, and how do we do that in small incremental steps? The second thing that I think is a practice, and so I have another talk that I called User Stories Suck. And what we have on the right here is what we've been doing. You know, user stories were invented almost 20 years ago, and before all those technology advances that I talked about. And you know, probably everybody on the call today is using user stories as a way of capturing requirements, and it's good for certain things, right? It's good at capturing what's the user's intent, what's the impact that we're going to try and make to the user, and how do we organize them in epics and features and other things. but it misses some key elements. It misses first, what's the objective of the business? Why are we even building this? So if we had a story that said, as a frequent flyer, I want to rebook past trips so that I can save time booking trips I take. All right, so that's a user story. It's valid, it's good, right? We know the frequent flyer, we're trying to save the frequent flyer time. But what's missing is, why would we as a business build that story? What's the context from our organization? So what's the objective? What's the business goal? So the objective may be, we would like to drive more business. You know, we'd like to increase our market share in the frequent flyer market by 10%. So that's an objective, and we're missing that context when we give it to the team. I'd much rather walk into the room with a team and say, hey, we have an objective to try and increase our market share with frequent flyers by 10%. Let's brainstorm on ways that we could do that. And now I've got my team engaged in trying to solve the right problem. And then let's make a hypothesis. So let's stop thinking about requirements as a fixed factual thing, right? It's just a guess. A requirement is a guess. So it's a hypothesis that we think if we build this, if we think, our hypothesis in this case would be, we think if we save the frequent flyers time, they will book more trips with us, right? So that's our hypothesis to try and drive towards that objective. And then the experiment would be, what's the smallest thing we could go build that would prove or disprove our hypothesis? How could we save them time? What's the smallest thing we could do to save them time? And that we would get some learning. So again, on the left here, we're really thinking about discovery and learning. On the right, we're really still thinking about execution and getting predictable, right? Agile 1.0, Agile 2.0. Then, you know, that starts driving. If we go to more of MP, you know, what I call an MVPE, right? Minimal viable product experiment, then that starts changing things from, instead of us just making subjective decisions, most of you have a prioritization technique in your company that I call a HIPPO technique, highest paid person's opinion. That's how most of you are getting prioritized today, as opposed to objective decision making, which says, hey, let's put something into production and see if it works. Let's, you know, let's create a link. I remember, you know, I started doing triathlons, and I was using Runkeeper, which is an app to keep track of your run. And one day, a camera icon showed up, and I was like, you know, why would I take a picture while I'm running? I'm running, like, but I clicked on it. I was curious, and behind the picture, there was a question that said, would you like to take pictures on your run? And I said, no. And then that was it. They said, thank you. And there was no camera. They hadn't figured out the API. There was no way to take pictures yet. All they had done was add a picture of an icon of a camera and added the question to say, that's the small, you know, their hypothesis was, we think people might want to take pictures on their run. What's the smallest thing we could do to see if people would like to take pictures? Let's add an icon and ask a question. Now, apparently I was in the minority, because now there's a camera that takes pictures, so enough people hit yes. And they learned, but they didn't have to build a lot of code. And that was an objective decision based on data and analytics that they were using to figure out what's the small, you know, what's the next thing that we should build, and how do we prioritize our backlog based on data-driven decisions as opposed to subjective decisions. So then, you know, we get into, how are we even planning? So are we plan-driven? You know, are we budget-driven? So all of us have probably been on an initiative or a project that was like funded with, you know, multi-millions of dollars for the next X months or years. And then what do we do with budgets? We spend them, right? We create a plan to spend them, and we try and spend them all, and we go for like the moonshot of like, we're going to do a big release, and we're going to spend all this money, and we're going to do a big launch, and we're going to release it. And my challenge would be for organizations to get out of that process, which then becomes a accounting kind of process, to more of a finance type of process. So if I'm talking to my CFO, the top part of this is talking his language, where the bottom part is talking the language of the accountant, right? So goal-driven investment would be saying, hey, I'm not going to give you $3 million. Our intent is, yeah, maybe we're going to spend $3 million over the next 3 years, but I'm going to give you $100,000 a month. But in order for you to get the money for next month, you got to come back in 30 days and convince me that we should still fund this, right? So what would that change in terms of behavior if the team knew that if they don't learn and don't prove something in the next month and get some market validation, that they're not going to get another $100,000? It's going to change the dynamic of what we're going to do. Instead of us just trying to execute on the plan and the budget, we're going to start thinking about how do we have objective discussions every 30 days about what we're learning. And it might even encourage teams to go in 2 months in and say, we don't recommend we continue to invest in this. We haven't figured this out, and we think we should go work on something else because this isn't working. And now the team is engaged in taking ownership in that. Right? So that starts changing our mindset of how we're even spending money and capitalizing and doing all those kinds of things. The next one here, I think there's two left. I've lost count. I should put numbers on these slides. Is releasing continuously versus integrating continuously. So I talked about this a little bit earlier, that with DevOps, now we've got to get to this notion of releasing quickly. And if we're not releasing quickly, we're not going to be able to get something in production and learn quickly, right? So we've got all these tools, right? I mean, there's so many on here, right, that we can use, and they're all available to us, which is great. But we can't just focus on continuous integration. We've got to get all the way to continuous deployment, continuous delivery, and that's then going to allow us, this ability to respond quickly and learn quickly. I had a CTO at one of our clients who was all about speed, and the story that I heard was, he said, I don't care if you are going so fast that you might put a bug into production, but part of what I mean by speed is, first, I want to know how quickly you found it, and I want to, and ideally you find it before the customer does, and I want you to be able to have the speed to fix it quickly. And they didn't build a process of like, how do we roll back changes? It was, no, how can we have the infrastructure that if we put a bug into production, we will be able to fix it, diagnose it, get it reported, fix it, address it, resolve it, and put more code out into production so fast that it doesn't disrupt our market. And that's a very different way of thinking about things. And that's what, having full continuous CD type of pipeline would allow us to the ability to do. And so it's not just that we're moving fast, but that we're able to respond fast, right? And this infrastructure is what allows us to do that. And then the last one here is about, what are we measuring, right? So are we measuring points and how many points we're getting done? And I hear too many teams talking about, we need to get credit for all the work we did. That's an output mentality. We want an outcome mentality for our teams and for our organization. It's not about how much code we got done. It's how much of the right code we got done. And I like how Hendrik Nieberg puts in his video, he says it's about getting the most outcome with the least amount of output, right? How do we get the most outcome? And so, the whole careful what you measure. Now, when I think about measuring value, I'm not thinking about measuring value in terms of dollars. That's a very fuzzy, noisy metric. If you're like, how is this impacting revenue? That's a very top line thing. There's a lot of stuff that factors into that. So measuring value goes all the way back to what's the objective and how are we going to know? So going back to the frequent flyer and in saying, hey, we want to increase market share. And so that the top line objective could be $1, but then the key results within that objective could be things like retention, or how does a frequent flyer rebook a trip within 90 days of booking their last trip? Do they refer us to other people? What are the other kind of KPIs or things or analytics, the picture here being like a dashboard of how will we know that we are providing value to our market? And what are those, retention metrics or attraction metrics or other things, or the pirate metrics, the things that are telling us that we are actually making an impact based on, whatever the context of the feature is that we're working on. That's how we're going to measure value. It's not going to turn into some magic ROI formula, but there's definitely a way that we can say, are we making the impact from an outcome perspective? And velocity is still a metric we should capture, but it's not necessarily the metric, right? That's not the top thing that we should be focused on, right? And that, we could talk about productivity. Some people think of productivity in terms of output, and I would think about productivity in terms of value, and that's a very different way of thinking about that. So to summarize, what we just looked at here. So on the left, we've kind of got a summary of those values. And on the right, we've got, the 6 practices that I just walked through that correlate into these values, the things that we can do. So the last question that I want to kind of ask you is which of the ones on the right here of 1 through 6, I said that, and I think the next survey is going to be A through E or something like that. But the note to self, fix that. But so which of these practices on the right, serving customers versus stakeholders, hypotheses, which of these do you think would be the most important or the most impactful or is the most foundational? Do you think that would make that impact to helping an organization get to next level agility? So pick one of those. And then final poll here is, of course, I changed it to letters over here, is final poll. Go ahead and text in A, B, C, D, E, or F here, and we'll see what kind of comes in, and then I'll wrap up and take questions. All right, I'm right on 12:45. All right, good job. Good job. Okay. All right, so we got about 40 results in. So serving customers versus stakeholders, right? So having the right intent, who are we talking to? That could definitely be. And then you've got on the other end, like how are we measuring, and that's going to affect how people are potentially held accountable or motivated. Which way you want to spend that. Objective versus subjective. And okay, so we see some good stuff there. Interesting. Okay, so cool. Just to kind of wrap up again in the context of what we're talking about. So the you may be at this stage. Some of you said you're in the improving agility, and most of you said you're in improving agility. And you may be thinking about, all right, how do I get to a predictable level of agile? You may not be able to jump from what I call like 20-mile-an-hour agile to 100-mile-an-hour agile, next level agility. And while those things are things to be thinking about, you also should be thinking about how do we get to some level of predictability. And you got to get predictable before you can start going faster. So getting predictable, getting faster, that's what enables us to be able to have this next level agility and be adaptable. We can respond to our market if we can push things into production quickly. We can only push things into production quickly if we're able to have a predictable cadence of delivery. And we can only do that if we've created this foundational culture of team ownership and team improvement. So, if you've got questions or things about like, hey, we're stuck somewhere along this path to agility, this is the Agile Velocity shameless plug that's paying for this webinar today. We'd love to talk to you, talk to your organization, talk to your leadership team about how to help you kind of accelerate through this path to agility. That's what we do. We train and coach organizations along this journey. We'd love to, if we can help, we can help. We'd love to be able to do that. But so what questions do we have today, Jessica?
Yeah, so our first question is from Chris, and he asks, how do you emphasize discovery over execution, but be able to adapt to change instead of executing to a plan? That was the first one in the Q&A.
So, okay, so say that again, because the second part threw me, I think, a little bit. Discovery over execution.
How do you emphasize discovery over execution, but also be able to adapt to change instead of executing to a plan?
Yeah, so I mean, I think adapt to change is part of discovery, but I do think like this discovery and execution can compete with each other, and so I could think of a couple. Let me stop the share, right? So I can think of a couple things. Like, so as a startup, we definitely are in discovery, right? There's no execution. We shouldn't be executing very much on a plan at all because we don't know, very much in that organization. Then you go to the other end of the spectrum would be something like maintenance work that is pretty well known. There's low risk that we've gotten it wrong. It's a specific request that like we understand it, and we just need to go build it, and we just need to execute on it. And And I think most teams are more in the second spectrum, but I think more teams should be pushing to somewhere in the middle. And I don't think we have, as a industry yet, all the answers of what's the best way of managing all of that work, because on one end of the spectrum we're kind of more velocity and plan driven and we can be predictable, but in a discovery world we don't have that same level of predictability because we don't have a plan that's fully laid out. So we're iterating towards the target, and there is some element of we know we're done when we've achieved some of the objectives, or we decide that we're not going to be able to reach the hypothesis that we set, or prove the hypothesis wrong. So I think there's definitely an element of one answer I would give is distinguish the difference between that work and make that clear. You may have a team that is more discovery focused and a team that's more execution focused, and that could be an interesting thing. But there's going to be teams where that's going to be mixed, and so the priorities become I would tie it back to key objectives, so that we can start figuring out how much time are we going to allocate towards one of the spectrum or the other. Where are we as a market, as a product, and how are we going to balance that? Sometimes it's easier to allocate with different teams. Within a team, there's also other allocation strategies that I would potentially take there. Next question.
Cool. So the next question comes from Allison, and she asked, you mentioned having customers as a part of sprint reviews. How do you think a UX team as a part of Scrum plays into that or helps?
Yeah. So I think UX is really critical in this new world, and can be one of the main conduits that's trying to bridge the gap between the customers and the team. So I always have, in Agile 1.0 world, I would say I've always seen UX as working a little bit, being a part of the team, being that a person that's a representative of this team, but working a little bit ahead of the team, and making sure that the team is got what they need to consume. But in this world, they may be the person who is really helping drive and partnering with product to say, okay, we've got this objective, and thinking about the hypothesis and thinking about what's the experiment we could run. And sometimes that's classic techniques in UX around things like paper prototyping and user testing. But at the same rate, I see too often we go way too far to the right of being very analytical, research driven, and I believe the more analysis and research we do, the more we've convinced ourselves we're right without true validation of the market. And so we definitely want UX in this new world to start thinking much more iteratively and incrementally, and not UX. Some UX teams I can see fall into the trap of perfection, right? Because it is there is an element of an art to the job there, and so I see too often UX fall into the trap of we got to go design the whole thing and figure out the whole flow before we can give you one page to start working on. And so we've got to start working in an iterative, collaborative way with the team, where we think about the whole team of a product kind of expert, a UX expert, the technical experts, and together we're taking this objective and defining hypothesis and defining experiments, and everybody's got their specialty that they're bringing to the table, but we're all working together to iterate towards the end goal. UX is just a partner as a part of that team.
All right. Next one comes from an anonymous attendee who asks, what are your top 3 Agile metrics that you would report to leadership?
I think I would go to the value aspect, and I think so the classic coaching answer of it depends, and it depends on your context. So the metrics I would report would be less about output and velocity and things like that in this world, right? And if you're in improving and trying to get predictable, then I would look at metrics like velocity and how much carryover and are we getting predictable. But at this stage, what I would be reporting is those, I would think, business metrics, right? Customer metrics. So in that scenario around the frequent flyer, what is our current market share? What is it trending to? How many new rebookings have we gotten? What are the metrics that are tied into the objective? However we define the objective, then, and I like to use OKRs in this context. So an objective and key results. So what are the key results? And that then drives to your KPIs, and then those are the things that you're reporting. You know, are we achieving the objective that we set out to? And the other metrics are more internal for the teams to know, hey, here's what our velocity is, and here's what's happening, and we're owning our improvement. But ultimately, we got to think about the business outcomes.
We do have another one that's asking if Agile 1.0 seems to be working for some of us, how will Agile 2.0 become more necessary than traditional Agile methods? Yeah, so
I would say Agile 1.0 maybe is sufficient but not great for most, for many of the companies. I think most companies and CEOs that I talk to are really challenged right now to keep up with the changing dynamics of their market and culture, and that's forcing, there's that stat that like the rate of the number of Fortune 500 companies that are going out of business is exponentially increasing. Where 30 years ago, if you're in the Fortune 500, you're expected to be in the Fortune. Most of those companies have been in the Fortune 500 for decades, and that's no longer the case. The top 5 companies, like largest companies, are companies like Amazon and Apple and Google and Microsoft, not the typical Exxons and everything else, right? Like those bigger companies are starting to shrink because they're not adapting fast enough. So while it may feel in this time that it is sufficient, it's not. And that's my challenge for you today, is that you might feel comfortable, but you're gonna, if you get comfortable, you're gonna get your ass kicked pretty soon by somebody else in your market. And if you're not creating a technology and getting to organizational agility, your company is going to be struggling somewhere in the next 3 to 5 years.
All right. This is in reference to your talk about user stories, but someone asked, what about the so that part of a user story that states the why? Yeah, so I think it states the why from a user's perspective. It doesn't capture the why from an organizational, from our company perspective, right? So the why is really important, and it is the most important part for the user story. And the reality, even though I say user stories suck, and when I think about objective, hypothesis, experiment, the reality is you probably would write the experiment as a user story, right? So you could write the experiment in the form of, okay, now we've decided we want to run this experiment. So as a I want so that, and go build that. Now we're executing on building experiments. So the why is definitely important, but we're missing the why from why would we build it, as opposed to just why would the customer want it. All right. It looks like we have time for one last question. Somebody asked, how will Agile 2.0 help consulting companies? Consulting.
Let's see. So I'm going to interpret that as consulting companies as custom software development companies, or consulting companies as Agile consulting companies. I'm not sure what the question would be from. So I think if you go from a services development standpoint, for Agile consulting. Okay, so how would it help us? Well, I mean, from a market space that we're in, I mean, I think there's an element of it helps us because there's the next frontier, and I've always, even from founding the company, known that, like, okay, yeah, I did a lot of work with Scrum 1.0, and at some point, I believe Agile 1.0 is not even going to be called Agile. It's just going to be software development. That's just what we do, and it's expected, and that's how everybody works. And so, there's always going to be the next frontier. And I think these things are emerging, and my motivation of trying to share these concepts, I think these things are emerging to the market. They're definitely more cutting edge, bleeding edge types of things that some companies are doing some of, but I don't know that there's a lot of companies that are doing great with it. And so this starts shaping out, all right, what's next for organizations, and therefore organizations are going to seek out help in order to make that happen.
All right. So that's going to wrap up our webinar today, right on time. It's exactly 1 o'clock. So thank you, everybody, for joining. And as always, keep an eye on your email. We will be sending out the recap with the recording probably in about the next week or so. So just keep an eye out for that.
Yeah,
All
thanks
right.
a lot.
Thanks, guys.